Hi and welcome. On this channel, we break down ideas, share knowledge, and make learning simple and enjoyable. If you're someone who loves to grow and learn new things, don't forget to subscribe and join us.
My husband sat across from me at our kitchen table on a Tuesday morning and told me his family thought it would be better if I didn't attend the foundation gala that Friday. The one whose venue I had spent 14 months transforming from a crumbling warehouse in the meatpacking district into something the Times would later call a revelation in spatial restraint. His mother felt my presence might complicate the image they were trying to project to the European acquisition committees. It was nothing personal, he said. It was strategic. I asked him to say that again. He did. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I drove north on Route 9W with one bag in the trunk and my phone on silent. And I was somewhere in the Catskills, sitting on the sagging porch of a rental cottage I'd found in 40 minutes of searching. When the messages started coming through all at once, 37 of them, something had gone completely wrong at the gala I hadn't been invited to attend. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My husband and I had been married for 6 years when things started to shift. In the beginning, back when his family's foundation was more of a tax vehicle than a functioning institution, and the gallery itself was a third-floor walk-up in Chelsea, with water damage on the east wall. I was the one who made things work. I'd spent 5 years before we met doing high-end residential and commercial design, the kind of work that required both technical fluency and the ability to read a room, to understand what a space was trying to say and what it was failing to communicate. When I walked through that Chelsea gallery for the first time, I saw immediately what it could be. I also saw that my husband, for all his genuine passion for art, had no idea how to make anyone feel welcome in a room. We married 8 months after we met. By our first anniversary, I had redesigned the gallery space entirely, sourced 3 emerging artists who would go on to significant careers, and written the foundational design philosophy document that the family's marketing team would later repackage as a printed brochure. My language, my ideas, my byline quietly removed in the second draft. I noticed. I said something. My husband asked me to be patient. I was patient for 5 more years. The foundation came about in year 3. My father-in-law had connections to serious European money. Collectors, museum boards, the kind of people who flew into New York specifically for Art Week and expected to be impressed by something they hadn't seen yet. My mother-in-law understood that the gallery's credibility would need to scale with those ambitions. What she didn't understand, or chose not to, was that the credibility had been built largely by me. The venue aesthetic that everyone referenced in write-ups. The artist relationships I'd cultivated over years. The opening events which I designed down to the acoustic properties of the room and the specific temperature of the lighting to make the paintings look their most honest. By year 4, my mother-in-law had begun what I can only describe as a quiet editorial campaign. It started as suggestions. I should dress more conservatively at openings. I should let my husband lead the conversations with major collectors. They's responded better to him, she said, though the collectors she named were people I'd introduced him to first. I should step back from the curatorial decisions, because the foundation needed to present a unified voice, and that voice should clearly be his. I stepped back. I kept working anyway. The Meatpacking Warehouse Commission was supposed to be the foundation's defining moment. The first major permanent space, the project that would place them in a genuinely different category. My husband brought me in to lead the design. I spent 14 months on it, sourcing reclaimed Douglas fir for the flooring, collaborating with a structural engineer to open the full ceiling height, without compromising the load-bearing walls, designing a lighting system that could shift color temperature across the course of a day, and change the emotional register of whatever hung on the walls. I was proud of that building in a way. I hadn't been proud of anything in years. It was mine, even though nothing with the foundation ever had my name attached to it. The gala to inaugurate the space was scheduled for a Friday in October. Engraved invitations went out, 400 of them, including a delegation from 3 Scandinavian design institutions whose acquisition budgets collectively ran into 8 figures. My name was not on the invitation. My name had not been on anything connected to that building. I found out the way you find out most devastating things, indirectly, and too late to pretend it didn't matter. A colleague of mine, someone I'd brought into a project 2 years earlier, and who now managed the foundation's events, texted me a screenshot of the internal attendee list with no accompanying message. Just the image. My name was absent. In the notes column beside my husband's name, someone had written, "Per family advisory, keep presentation cohesive, minimize variables." I was a variable to be minimized. When my husband confirmed it that Tuesday morning, he used the phrase, image alignment, 3 times. He said his mother had been working with a communications consultant who specialized in philanthropic positioning. He said the European committees responded best to a certain kind of presentation. Legacy adjacent, with clear lines of leadership. He said I was talented. But that talent wasn't really the point. I thought about the 14 months. I thought about the lighting system. I thought about the night in year 2 of our marriage, when he had to give his first major collector presentation, and spent 3 hours on the floor of our living room, convinced he was going to humiliate himself. I'd stayed with him until midnight, going through his talking points, until he could deliver them without looking at the paper, reminding him that genuine passion was the one thing no amount of polish could counterfeit. He'd called me from the street outside the collector's office the next day. "We did it," he'd said. "We." I said, "You're right, I'll stay home." He looked surprised. He'd expected a fight. I'd expected to want one. But sitting there in the kitchen we'd renovated together, in the apartment I'd made beautiful in ways he'd never thought to articulate, I felt something settle in me like sediment. Not defeat. Something quieter and more permanent than defeat. I packed a bag before noon. I left my apartment keys on the counter beside a book I'd been meaning to return for 2 years. No note, no explanation. I drove north until the city felt like something I was reading about rather than living inside. The cottage I found in the Catskills was the opposite of everything I'd spent years designing. The floors were uneven. The windows rattled when the wind came off the ridge. The kitchen had a cast iron stove that took 15 minutes to get going every morning and required a quality of attention that modern appliances never ask for. I loved it immediately in the way you love things that make no demands of your aesthetic judgment. I turned my phone off when I arrived and left it in the glove compartment overnight. In the morning I walked into town for coffee and passed a ceramics studio twice. A converted barn with a hand-lettered sign that said simply Nels. Before I finally went in, the woman at the wheel was somewhere in her late 60s, with white hair cut close and the unhurried posture of someone who had long ago stopped performing productivity for other people. She didn't look up. "There's coffee on the back table," she said. "Cups are for sale, but you can use the chipped one for free." I used the chipped one. I came back the next morning and the morning after that. On the 3rd day, she asked what had brought me up. I told her about the warehouse in the meatpacking district. About 14 months. About the phrase minimize variables. She listened without interrupting, the clay turning steadily under her hands. "I left a gallery director position in Soho," she said, when I finished. 22 years ago. They decided the gallery needed a different kind of face. Someone whose family had been in the collecting world for generations. Someone who fit the image they were building for a particular donor base. She kept her eyes on the clay. I had built that gallery from a group show in a rented basement. I had documentation proving it. None of it mattered once they decided on the story they wanted to tell. A pause. I moved up here. Started making things with my hands instead of managing other people's visions. Best professional decision I ever made. "Did they call you after you left?" I asked. "For months." The collector relationships fell apart without me in ways they hadn't anticipated. A slight smile. Apparently certain things had been held together by someone they'd considered expendable. I sat with that for the rest of the day. I was on the cottage porch the following evening, watching the light go sideways through the maples, when I turned my phone on for the first time in 4 days. It took 40 seconds for the notifications to finish loading. 44 texts. 19 voicemails. 11 emails marked urgent. My husband's number appeared 11 times in the missed calls. My mother-in-law's appeared twice. She had never called me directly in 6 years of marriage. My father-in-law's appeared once, which was somehow worse. I listened to the voicemails in order. My husband's first message used the donor call voice, controlled and measured. There's been a situation involving some of the press documentation. We need to coordinate before the coverage picks up. Please call me as soon as you get this. His second, 20 minutes later, had a different texture. The Thorvald Group is asking specific questions. Sine Thorvald herself has seen the original design briefs. I'm not sure how they got into the press packets. Please call me. By his third message, the voice had changed entirely. Sine Thorvald gave a statement and left. She took the Anderson Foundation with her. Several other attendees followed. I need to, please call me. My colleague's text explained what had happened. The Foundation's junior events coordinator had been asked to compile comprehensive documentation for the Scandinavian delegation's press packets, a thorough record of the building's development. He'd done exactly that. Every document. The original design brief, with my name on the header. The structural consultation correspondence listing me as lead designer. The lighting system specifications I'd written. The early conceptual sketches with my handwriting in the margins. Sine Thorvald, who directed one of the most respected design museums in Denmark, had been reading through the packet during the cocktail hour. When my husband stepped to the podium to speak about the family's vision for the space. She'd looked up from the documents. She'd looked at him, and then she'd asked. Clearly enough that the room stilled around her, who had actually designed the building. My husband had said, it was a collaborative foundation effort. She'd held up the design brief. She'd read my name from the header. She'd asked again. He'd said something about key team members. She'd closed the packet. She'd turned to the people beside her, said something low, and walked out. 8 people left with her. Within 30 minutes, according to my colleague, the room had the quality of a formal event that everyone present understood was already over. My mother-in-law's voicemail attempted warmth and landed somewhere closer to desperation. Darling, there have been some misunderstandings that I think we can address together. This has gotten out of hand, and I want you to know that we have always valued your role in the Foundation's development. Whatever impression you may have received, please call me. The family is asking for your support at this moment. The family was asking for my support. My father-in-law's message ran 37 seconds and contained a thinly veiled reference to the legal ramifications of allowing damaging narratives to propagate without correction. The last voicemail was from the Foundation's board chairman, a man I'd met twice at donor dinners. He offered me a consulting retainer, a specific dollar amount, 6 months, minimal actual responsibilities, in exchange for a signed statement confirming that my absence from the gala had been my own choice, a personal decision unrelated to the Foundation's planning. He said the contracts could be drawn up that night. He said it protected everyone's interests. I sat with the phone face down on the porch table and watched the maple move in the dark for a long time. There was an email from an address I didn't recognize, an institutional domain Danish. I almost scrolled past it. Sine Thorvald wrote the way people write who have learned to say precisely what they mean. She said she had recognized the design philosophy in the meatpacking building from a piece I'd published in a trade journal 4 years earlier. Before the Foundation years. Before any of this, she said the documentation had confirmed what she'd suspected. That I was the building's creative author. She said her institution was mounting a major design survey, and that she wanted to speak with me about both the project's inclusion and a possible commission for a new gallery wing in Copenhagen. She included her direct number. She wrote. At the end. I hope you'll be in touch. Attribution is not a small thing. I read it twice. Then I went inside, made coffee on the cast iron stove, and sat at the kitchen table in the dark while the cottage settled around me. In the morning I walked to Nell's studio and told her what had happened. She made 2 cups of tea in cups she'd thrown herself, and set one in front of me without ceremony. So, she said, what are you going to do with it? I drove back to the city 8 days after I'd left. The apartment felt like a museum exhibit of a life I'd been a character in rather than the author of. Divorce papers had already been filed. My husband's attorney had moved quickly. The language precise and impersonal. in the way that legal documents accomplish what people cannot bring themselves to say. I read them at the kitchen counter with something that surprised me. By being closer to relief than grief, the decision had been made, cleanly, by someone who believed he was punishing me with it. I called Signe Thorvald, the following morning, from a coffee shop in Brooklyn, nowhere near the Foundation's neighborhood. I opened my studio in February, a second-floor space in Gowanus with good north light, and the smell of industry drifting through the windows on warm days. Nothing like the rooms I'd spent years designing for other people's legacies. I put my name on the door, just my name, in simple letters, because there was no one left to approve the font. The Copenhagen Commission was formalized in the spring. I heard about my husband's engagement through a mutual acquaintance. His fiancée came from a family whose name appeared on 2 Manhattan museum wings. My mother-in-law was quoted in a philanthropy newsletter as saying the match represented everything the family had worked toward. The subtext didn't require decoding. He had finally gotten the right kind of wife, the one who fit the criteria his family had been quietly writing for years. Before either of them admitted it out loud, the Foundation's European relationships did not recover. The meat-packing building remained critically admired, which was its own kind of accountability. Every review referenced the design without being able to attribute it credibly to anyone my husband chose to name. The major acquisition committees stopped coming to New York for their events. The annual gala budget was reduced. My father-in-law stepped down from a board he'd sat on for 11 years, citing personal reasons. My mother-in-law, who had spent 6 years positioning herself as a steward of artistic integrity, was managing a legacy, with a crack running through it that she hadn't put there and couldn't fill. I did not gloat. I was working on a building in Copenhagen with a woman who had walked out of a room on my behalf before she'd ever met me. And that felt like more than enough of anything I had ever wanted from justice. Nell came to my studio opening in March, and stood in the middle of the main room for a long time, without speaking, the way people who genuinely understand space read a room before they say anything about it. "You made it yours," she said finally. I had. Not by fighting for it. Not by orchestrating a single thing. By doing the work honestly, and then stepping back and letting other people's choices carry their own weight, the way structures built on a dishonest foundation eventually do. I keep a photograph on my desk. I took from the cottage porch in the Catskills on the 4th morning there, when the light came through the maples at an angle that had nothing to prove. No staging, no framing, no intention behind it. Just light on leaves, doing exactly what light does. Some mornings I look at it and think about the phrase image alignment, and about my name on the header of every document that actually mattered. And about the way Signe Thorvald read it aloud in a room full of people who had been arranged there to be impressed by someone else. The image they'd worked so carefully to construct had required my erasure to hold together. Which turns out to be the most honest thing they ever told me about what I was worth, and, more importantly, about what they were.